Good morning and welcome everyone to the US Gerety Jury Insights panel. The Gerety Awards is the only creative prize to award the best in advertising from the female creative vision. So I'm very excited to be joined here today by some of our brilliant jurors. We've gathered them to give us a peek inside the jury room and talk about some of the trends they've seen and the work that's really impressed them. I'm Alexandra Jardine, UK editor of AdAge, by the way, and I'm joined by Sherina Florence, Group Creative Director at 72 and Sunny. You know, give us everyone a wave, Sherina, so we know who you are.
Hi, happy to be here. Thank you, Alexandra.
Hi. And Emily Sander, Executive Creative Director at VMLY&R.
Hello, happy to be here too.
And Bianca Guimaraes, Executive Creative Director at Mischief.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Hi, Bianca. And JinJa Birkenbeuel, CEO at Birk Creative.
Hello, everybody.
Hi. So I'm going to start off by just going around the room and asking everybody about the piece of work that they really love this year, your standout piece of work, and the one that really stayed with you and made an impression on you. And I'm going to start with Sherina.
Oh, hey, yeah. So there was a lot of great work entered this year. I think that it's difficult to choose just one entry that is the most iconic. I think for me, Teenage Dream still continues to really stand out across all of the shows, just across the experience of the past year, and becomes even more relevant every day that we live in culture. So I think that for me, that one is unfortunately timeless, but also very I think relevant and provocative right now.
Yeah, incredibly powerful piece of work. JinJa, how about you?
Well, my most favorite ad was the Snickers ad with the couple that were sitting at a table and they were playing a board game, and there was a complete misunderstanding, which I won't share because I feel like it's a punchline killer, but it really made me laugh, and I felt that the advertisement was very simple. It was direct. You were drawn into the conversation between the two couples, and at the very end, something happened that made you absolutely laugh out loud. And I laughed really loud because, without giving it away, something very similar happened to me once. So it's just really brilliant. And it's also interesting because in a pandemic, many people were drawn to their laptops and cell phones and things like that. And this is a representation of a couple getting together, playing an in-person board game, which I thought was great. And of course, Snickers is a delicious candy bar. It's one of my favorites anyway. So I just feel like they are consistently branding their messaging as Snickers always satisfies. And I love the idea of Snickers always satisfies because of the punchline joke that came at the end. So that was really my most standout ad that I saw when I was judging. But you agree that there were so many amazing entries. It's hard to choose your favorite, but that one I really need to laugh right now.
Yeah, that was funny. Bianca, what stood out for you?
Yeah, for me, it's tough to pick one. I was in between a couple, but I guess the wish for Penny comes to mind. Just the film. Like I think mostly the reason I kind of mentioned that that comes to mind is because you think that throughout the film when you're watching it, you're like imagining it's about like all sorts of different things. Then when you see the payoff at the end and you're like, oh, it's like an ad about the quarantine and it's different than all the other ones we've seen. And it feels like, yeah, it's still like it's still the sort of emotional storytelling, but just the way they did it felt like very nice direction and in a very cinematic way. It's beautiful, but then the payoff, it's like it just kind of surprises you, and you're like, and you relate to it. You're like, that's true. If my kid was that age, I would be like devastated that they're wasting like the 2-3 best years of their lives. So that one was, and then they're doing something like putting their money where their mouth is by not just saying that message, but also giving away like 5,000 experiences for a bunch of teens, or I forget exactly how many, but they're doing something about it, not just pointing the problem.
Yeah, that one really resonated with me too, sort of having teenagers and seeing them go through the lockdowns and everything. I think maybe if you're a mother, it really has a particular message about what life's been like. But yeah. Emily, what about you?
My 3-year-old was definitely happy about it, by the way. He did not care about spending all the time at home with mom, so.
Yeah.
He loved it. I mean, I agree with everyone else. I think it's always hard to narrow down to one because different things rise up, you know, and kind of hit you in different ways. I agree. Teenage Dream is haunting. It's something that I saw in another award show that the first time I saw it just hit me, and it really continues to. I mean, certainly for the relevance now. But, you know, something different that in its simplicity, but its ability to create so many different integrated kind of tentacles was the liquid billboard for Adidas. I just thought it was really nice use of media in terms of placement where it was on the beach, on the water, a great way to showcase swimwear. And then also the way that they, you know, had a camera there that then could allow for other content. So you could actually kind of look into it from elsewhere. So even if you weren't on the beach, you were still accessing content and getting the story told. I just thought it was a really smart use of media and taking a really simple idea that then becomes larger and more integrated.
Yeah, that was so clever, that one. And I don't know about you, but when I first saw that, I kind of felt, why has no one ever thought of that before? That's such a great idea.
Yeah, and I think, you know, ideas like that, you know, that have you going, oh man, I wish I'd done that. I mean, those are the ones that will always then kind of stick with you. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think that's so interesting. And what I like about that is that you've all chosen very different pieces of work there. But I think they all in some way reflect the last couple of years. JinJa, you mentioned, you know, the people playing Monopoly in real life. Bianca had the one about the quarantine, and Teenage Dream obviously reflects a different facet of what's going on with gun violence and that ongoing kind of horrificness of that. And the Adidas billboard as well, I think that kind of points to a kind of resurgence in really great outdoor ideas that we've seen since the pandemic. So yeah, I was kind of wondering what whether you felt that the work that you saw really kind of reflected what's been going on over the past couple of years, and whether that was one of the themes, and also with things like more awareness of diversity, the Black Lives Matter movement. Was there a lot of work that reflected, you know, the times that we're living in? Emily, do you want to kick off with this one?
Yeah, you know, I think that there wasn't a lot of work that really just spoke to the pandemic. I feel like you probably last year would have gotten a lot of that. You know, a lot of work that comes out of we're living in this world and it's, you know, uncertain times. I think we're in a place now, though, that the work is there are like niche kind of, or things that were once niche and are now more, I think, people are aware of more. It's the consciousness that is raised in terms of valuing, you know, from Black Lives Matter. I think that there was one, and I'm forgetting the name of it, but it showed you a tour of different Black-owned businesses and sort of the experience around the country. There was one with the British Museum that actually told you the unfiltered kind of history of what of the artifacts that are in the British Museum and where those actually came from. You know, like paying attention more to, I think, the human experience and recognizing those stories that maybe we weren't paying attention to for a long time, that I think during the time of the pandemic came to the fore. You know, as we stopped and kind of looked around and various cultural issues rose up.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Sherina, what was your take on all of that?
Oh, I think I'm completely aligned with Emily. There is a very heightened awareness, I think, across the board, kind of culturally across a spectrum of issues that become probably more pressing every day that passes. I think now we're starting to see that personal sense of urgency and need for safety kind of getting expressed in all types of work, need for liberation of women's voices, liberation of diverse voices, all of these things. I think the strong push is coming because it's almost past time, so like that coil of progress has been pulled back and is finally leaping forward.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. I mean, there's been a lot of work as well about, things that pertain to women. And I guess maybe as an all-female jury, it'd be interesting to hear your take on that too. Like a lot of work about things like the menopause and endometriosis, and those kind of issues that were never mentioned before. Bianca, was that something that you noticed or had a particular take on this year?
Yeah, definitely I noticed it. I think it's very important to do all of that work, and I'm glad that brands are going there and they know that they need to also like have a social purpose and not just, push more products. But I have to say it's also refreshing to when it's just like, that funny dumb ad for some product that's not like, like a heavy topic with like some sort of piano this music, it's and always, or it's refreshing when they do actually, they are doing social cause stuff, but in a way that feels different than just and I know I said the wish like, and that's very much in that, but I just like when we kind of just the tonal whiplash when you're judging too.
Yeah.
Yeah, can I add to that? I mean, I totally agree with that. I think there's an expectation as a female jury that we are going to only respond to female stories, and the emotional stories are going to be the things that we're going to really resonate with. And Womb Stories was great. I think that Womb Stories was a really great campaign. It really, expressed and it spoke to endometriosis. But at the same time, sitting in the jury in the room, the spot with Larry David that aired during the Super Bowl, I mean, that probably got the most. We were just like, it lightened the room up. We were just so happy to see something different that just wasn't about that. It was just a good, solid, well-crafted, funny, smart, ad. And I think that being an all-female jury doesn't mean we need all female topics. I think it's really just about we have our own point of view, but we want to see, I think, all the same entries that you would look at in any other award show.
Yeah. And I was interested actually that JinJa chose the Snickers ad as her favorite piece, which is like a pure kind of comedy piece, and we don't see very much of that at the moment. Was that something you guys felt was maybe lacking in the entries overall?
I mean, I think there were some funny ads, but there weren't as many as I would have liked to have seen that were just sort of pure comedy. Comedy is really difficult. I don't even know that a lot of the agencies have the bandwidth or the bench to really put out hilarious ads at scale. I don't know that a lot of the ad agencies are there. I mean, one of the things I noticed, to Bianca's point, is I was hearing the same piano music the entire time for all the ads, the same sort of dramatic piano sound. And as a mother of, I'm a musician myself. I have 3 records with my husband in a country band. My son is a jazz pianist heading to New York actually for school in the fall. And I'm very sensitive to music. And so I just was like, I don't want to hear another dramatic piano sound, and who's actually choosing all this music. But back to Emily's point, I feel that what I liked about seeing all the ads about women, the endometriosis, things related to women having their periods, I just felt like we need more of that, actually. We need more of those ads to be put in the mainstream, because conversations around the challenges that women have with their bodies, with their work, with their lack of pay equity, with their lack of actually winning contracts to be able to produce ads at this scale, like women-owned businesses, women-owned ad agencies, women branding companies, women producers, they're not getting shots at this type of work. So I actually want to see more of this running on mainstream advertising versus some of the other things that we're so used to seeing all the time. I don't want to keep repeating narratives over and over again. I want to hear a narrative that I haven't heard before. Now, yes, I love the Snickers ad, but I kind of loved it because it was just funny and subversive. Of course, there's two women that are like, yeah, let's do this, and then she was called out like, well, we weren't really talking about that. So I kind of like the fact that that was a little bit, dark and weird and funny. So I don't know. I'm like, I wish they would run endometriosis ads at least once a day, because I know many women that have that disease, and people need to know about it. Men need to know about it. Men control the money, they control the finance, they control the banks, they control the hospitals, they control the ad agencies, they control human resources. So why not have a million ads about endometriosis and issues related to women's pay equity or challenges around sexual harassment and rape crisis? That's kind of how I
have to shout it out, JinJa. Loopholes, which shortlisted, did try to not only talk about some of these issues like period poverty, but wrote and scored an original piece of music for you so that maybe both things can be true and not mutually exclusive, right? We can have really great content and also be causal at the same time. But to your point, it is great to see more conversations around endometriosis, more conversations around period poverty, and the challenges that I think usually just aren't a priority because they're not men's challenges. So
I mean, Emily, that one ad was
great, by the way.
The waitress. I mean, that one was real. That resonated with everybody in the room, right? The conversation with the waitress and what was happening to her, the cramps. It was really amazing. That specific ad,
that was for My Doll. Yeah, that was for My Doll. I mean, if we're talking about this type of thing, I loved Loopholes because I thought Loopholes was such a witty way to go about it, making a fake cereal and then putting it in there. I was just like, that's so smart and different. I mean, I like the different ways to approach it versus just piano music and kind of here's an anthemic spot, but like Mix for Boobs, right? Which had the two, like the boob records. That was also a different way to approach kind of, lessons and around, breast health and breast health awareness. I think those are fun because I think we've been starting to talk about it, and now we've got to find the smart ways to actually start to also impress change.
Yeah. And Emily, so to your point, you're saying that it's the work that delivers some sort of solution that's really speaking to you, right?
Yeah.
Not just making the point, but
here's a way to do something about it.
With it as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. Moving on slightly, I wanted to ask a little bit about the tech work and kind of digital stuff, because we've seen a lot of innovation in tech this year. We've seen NFTs, we've seen people talking about the metaverse. Sometimes it's all a bit overwhelming, or it is for me anyway. Was there anything in that kind of space that you really loved this year? I think, Sherina, you may have to go, is that right?
Yeah, I do have to go. But there was so much innovative work, and I feel like this has been such an amazing panel of women, and you're going to hear tons of different interesting points of view. But thanks for sharing space.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's been great having you.
Bye.
So Emily, do you want to talk about the tech stuff that you saw and whether you thought it was up to scratch this year or anything that really made an impression on you and stayed with you?
I think things like the first Meta sneaker, I thought that's an interesting different use of NFTs without getting too complicated, but just finding a different way to use NFTs. And then I also liked the Mercedes, the board, which I'm going to forget the name because there was so much work that we went through.
Was like
But
Millboard, I think.
the millboard, yeah, yeah. I liked the Mercedes in the wind, the millboard. I thought that that was also just a nice, simple way to kind of, you know, kind of get the message out there. I'm trying to think about like other innovation specific, and I gotta say, I wish we had seen a little bit more innovation. There were some things that I had seen, I know when I was judging Cannes that were not necessarily in here, but I felt like, you know, there's an opportunity, I think, for the Gerety Awards to keep growing, and certainly I think in innovation, that would be one area.
Yeah, yeah. Bianca, was there anything that you noticed?
Millboard too, and I think there was like a couple other NFT things. There was a Bacardi, you know, in the mix that was kind of interesting. But I think in general, it might feel like, again, just so people know a little more of like the types of things that the jury and in the future is looking for in terms of innovative work that we've seen out there that we certainly know exists, that it was entered, that should be in here. Because I think it goes back to the conversation we're talking about with the, you know, we don't want to just see the tampon ads and the, like, you know, all the stuff that feels more female focused.
Yeah.
So I think there's an opportunity to see more of that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I hope
there was the two that we spent a lot of time talking about, the house that can withstand you know, hurricanes and things. That was really, really interesting. We were trying to decide, you know, can it withstand, you know, erosion in Michigan and not fall into the lake? But that was a really that was an interesting ad that made a lot of sense, and it was beautiful to see a company working on creating homes that can withstand climate change, because that's really what came across was, you know, climate change is going to take the world down, but we can make a home that'll ensure that you won't die in it. And then there was also a really interesting new deodorant that was designed for people that have physical disabilities. And it never really occurred to me. It never occurred to me the simple act of putting on deodorant, you know, how challenging that could be. You know, these are just your own way of living, and you never. It's very difficult. I mean, people talk a lot about empathy and self-awareness, but it's really, really hard to put yourself in someone else's shoes, especially when there's a physical disability. You just have no idea, you know, when you're operating with all of your senses and people that don't have that. So I know you mentioned technology, and it did take a lot of technology to create those two things. So I would put those in the same sort of, you know, that kind of blew me away a little bit more than the NFT work did, to, you know, to Emily's point. When you see real, true, deep, you know, systemic change for human beings, that's that resonated with me.
Yeah, real innovation that's going to change lives, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's the degree, the adaptive deodorant is what you're talking about. That one, yes. And I think to that point, it's also, you know, product innovation. I think that's also a category that, you know, I think we could probably find some more interest in the future. But that was an example where it's not technology, it's product innovation, you know, directed toward a solution for people, which I just, you know, I always love those too, because I think advertising's ultimate great impact is also that we can change things for the better, as opposed to just sell tampons.
Yeah.
And I kind of wonder when I think about those, I mean, there's a lot of technology that goes into developing the products. You know, this may not have been the exact platform for innovation to be submitting work, to Bianca's point. So there's probably a lot more work out there that we didn't have the opportunity to see, because they're probably pushing them to different types of shows, is my guess.
Yeah.
When I think about, right, publications, even AdAge has put together, you know, the work that you featured and highlighted. I don't know that it was here, and we really need to work on that, because I think the women in the room, because we're women, and I know it sounds a little weird to say this, but we do have diversity of thought because we're women. We're not the traditional mainstream narrative, right? So we do approach problem solving and collaboration differently than a group of, you know, men in a room, you know, judging awards. So I think that we should really be encouraging people to submit more work to Gerety, because like I said, the women that are participating are very thoughtful. You know, we're highly motivated to really have a deeper understanding of the work that is out there, because we want work that reflects our lives and our challenges to help us, you know, live better and go through the world in better ways.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And yeah, I mean, we've touched on it, but would you have any other advice for people who are thinking about submitting to Gerety next year? What kind of stuff would you like to see more of, or maybe less of?
I mean, my advice would be just submit. I mean, submit more. I don't think you need to look at it like, okay, this is the Gerety Award. So what female products do we have in the agency that we can just submit those? What female topics that we can just submit those? Because it's not, you know, a jury of females to judge female directed work, like female targeted work. It's, you know, we're looking at everything. And I think it's about, you know, bringing that female perspective. I think to JinJa's point, there's so much empathy. There is a lot of natural, I think, kind of diverse thought that we're bringing to the table, and we want to look at it all. We spoke to it earlier too, like we would want to laugh just as much as anyone else. So, you know, it's a diversity of work. I guess I just want to see Gerety continue to grow. You know, I think we got an amazing kind of assortment of work this year. It was really fun to go through everything, and I definitely saw things in here that I had not seen before.
That's interesting.
So I don't think that we're at a bad. I think we're at a solid place. It's really just a matter of just more.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
were there many debates about what was going to win, or was there a consensus in the room?
There were debates. I think what the work that kind of like clearly stood out to everyone, and then there was like debates of sort of like some stuff that was in between, and you know, there was a lot of debate around it. But I think the sort of the stuff that was that, you know, that's probably gonna win is the stuff that we all like, you know, immediately were like, this is great.
Yeah.
Do you guys agree?
I agree.
Yeah.
I think the biggest debates were like looking at a piece of work and then being able to parse it from the category that it was submitted in, you know, like, because you could look at a piece of work and you might not think it's funny, but it might not have been submitted to humor. It might have been submitted to, you know, cinematography or editing or something like that. So I think maybe there were some pieces where it's just, okay, I might not gravitate to this, but it's in this category, so judge it against that lens.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Emily, because there were a couple of entries that we felt, oh my gosh, I'm looking at this from the wrong lens, and we had to bring ourselves back to focus on what was actually submitted for. And that was really something that I thought was really interesting, that we were able to, as a group, kind of, you know, bring each other around to say, we're talking about, you know, production versus something else. So yeah, I really enjoyed the entire process. I felt like in-person experiences that involved making decisions about another creative agency or creative person's work it's necessary to humanize the process. I think online judging really does take out that element that helps us be better judges, you know, because you're on your own on a laptop looking at things and saying yes or no. I kind of wonder sometimes, like, why would we even have that anymore? They really should be in person. I think that there's less opportunity for just clicking the button. Yes, this looks great. I love this. You know, the physicality and the conversations and the faces and the expressions and the laughter. And kind of like, we had a couple ads that we were like, the horror, like Apocalypse Now, the horror is like, oh my God, why was this here? And those were fun moments too, right, within the group. So
yeah,
we're not going to mention which ad we're talking about, because we're not going to give it any.
I'm really intrigued now, but yeah, I mean, that whole, like, you know, being in the room, the body language, the chemistry is really important, right?
Being in the room was great, because it's also that, like, we didn't debate. It was really just more about understanding another person's perspective. You might have, you know, I might have said something like, oh, I don't really love this, or this, I kind of thought it was a little bit too light, or that wasn't the right casting, or whatever it might be. And then somebody might say something that kind of made me look at it and adjust how the lens I'm laying onto it. And that's the beauty of doing in room, again, is that you can kind of have a more natural kind of conversation. But I really enjoyed the process of this. We did some online, but then being able to get together with the group, I thought was really fantastic.
Yeah, thank goodness for being back in the room.
Right.
Listen, we have to wrap up, but thank you so much, everybody, for joining me today. It's been such a great conversation with an awesome bunch of people. And thank you to everybody who's watching.